What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com. Thanks for being here. I'm going to talk about Reagan. This is uh, this is a polarizing movie for some, but I watched it anyway because I watch movies, and this has audio description, which ultimately was the thing that really swayed me in the end. Was the fact that it does actually have accessibility that I was able to listen to and talk about, and thank God, because sometimes films that are sort of independent seem to like lose the audio description, or they don't follow, or like I don't know what happened. I heard Sound of Freedom had a track in theaters. I don't know where it went. Like it just disappeared. Somebody made that track and it's just gone. Because the only thing I've ever heard is the TTS audio description track that dropped on Amazon. So that Amazon made for Sound of Freedom. But Reagan is a biopic with a very colorful cast, a very odd cast that shot up flares for me as it was going on. Kevin Sorbo doesn't get work outside of a certain handful of people willing to hire Kevin Sorbo. That's just the reality of it. So when I hear Kevin Sorbo in the cast, I know where I'm headed in terms of a movie. But at the same time, I also really like Dennis Quaid, and I've complimented his performances in multiple reviews fairly recently. He was in The Long Game with Jay Hernandez. I thought he was good in that. He's fantastic in The Substance. Actually, as of my recording of Reagan, I can say officially that I voted for him in at least one award that I vote for in supporting actor because I loved what he did in The Substance. I thought he was really pretty good in last year's The Hill. So I like Dennis Quaid as an actor, and I don't mind stepping into this film. But damn, after this, it's like Penelope Ann Miller, and I was like, what was the last thing I saw Penelope Ann Miller in? And do I not like her? No. I mean, every time I think about Penelope Ann Miller, I'm like, Kindergarten Cop is one of my favorite movies. So I always go back. It's like a nostalgic trip back. Mena Savari is like third build. We got John Voight here playing a Russian. it's it's just such an interestingly odd cast. C. Thomas Howell, as I mentioned, Kevin Sorbo. Um, I think there is actually a Reagan in here. What, Tommy Reagan? Is that a person? I think that was in the credits too at the beginning. It listed all the people who were in the cast. So, uh, a very big cast for a 2 hour and 20 minute biopic on Reagan. And depending on where you come from, I've seen this film praised. Um, Film Threat loved this movie. So, okay. And some other people did not like this movie. Uh, I think, I think there's a happy middle. There's a thing in between here. There's stuff to like and to take away from this, and there's stuff to not like and to take away from this. This movie is really long and kind of meanders a little bit. It sort of starts at one place. It chooses to start at the assassination attempt, and also then then chooses to have Russian John Voight sort of narrating the story, but narrating the story from the perspective of somebody who was like an opponent of Reagan. You know what I'm saying? Like at some point along the way, we'll find out when those two butted heads, kind of, you know? And he's telling this story to like to like a young Russian who's coming up, I guess, in Russia and communism. And this movie becomes like an anti-communism movie instead of just like a Reagan biopic, you know? I mean, you don't have to overthink it. Um, but I guess a lot of what Reagan was doing, you know, you have that moment, the tear, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. That's absolutely in here. And it's highlighted by, there's just some guy that's like, is he going to say it? And I was like, man, come on now. Like, why don't you just let Dennis Quaid have the moment? and not have somebody prompt it like, here it is, wait for the mic drop. Like, so that's kind of where I'm like, I don't know that this is the best filmmaker to have made a Reagan biopic. Um, and we probably could have gotten a better cast to support Dennis Quaid. Like, I kind of wish it had just been a little bit better. I liked Dennis Quaid in this. I'm not going to take that away from him. I think he, I think he is doing a really interesting job here. It's funny because he's also like, I also remember him taking a swing at sort of playing George W. Bush ish in American Dreams. Let's be honest, what that character was shaped after. Uh, and so this isn't really his first foray into um, going after a certain performance. I think he's played Ford too, if I'm right. Like in my mind, there's something in my mind that's screaming at me. He's also played Ford. He played Ford, but I can't remember what. Something. So in my mind, he did anyway. My mind is like he played Gerald Ford. So yeah, he's got sort of these Reaganisms about him, and it goes back and looks at him and Dutch. Uh, Growing up and what his home life was like and being an actor, but it also acknowledges the fact because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, he was a man, Ronald Reagan the actor. I mean, he was, but he also like sometimes people talk about it a little bit too much, like he was, I don't know, like Cary Grant or Jimmy Stewart or something like that. Like he was not on that level. And this film actually openly admits that he struggled as an actor, and he's doing like these really sort of like shitty gigs, where he's in this like at one point he does this show that has like showgirls behind him, and he's just kind of like, what is my life? What am I doing here? So I appreciate the willingness to show the totality of Reagan instead of continuing to just paint him as his whole everything he did was perfect. Um, he has I believe Mina plays Jane Wyman, the first wife, and so she has a little bit of interaction, and then Penelope comes in and plays Nancy, and neither one of them stood out to me in either of the roles. It's really hard because I think this film leans so heavily into Dennis Quaid, but they tried to give each one of them stuff to do, and it just kind of reminded me of why people haven't been giving Penelope and Mina like heavy work to do in the last couple of years. Uh, Mina did have a lot of critical acclaim really early on through American Beauty, and then her career just kind of like slowly petered out from there. And Penelope also, I don't remember anything she's done after the like out of the 90s. I don't like I remember The Relic. I remember a couple things in there, but I don't remember anything recently that she's been in. I'm sure she has been. Like I don't think they were like they reached all the way back into the 90s and pulled out Penelope Ann Miller. But you're watching this for Quaid. You're watching this to see how good he is and whether or not he matches. And he has to um he has to play Reagan through all of the years. This dude is playing Reagan. I think like are they de-aging him? I think he was playing him all the way back to like college age at least. Like he's at least on a college team at some point. And I'm like, damn, that is an expectation for Dennis Quaid to like be on, is he going that far back? Jesus. Because I was already thinking about like the age gap between him and Mina Savari like being on screen together. I was like, gee, this is weird when he's there with Jane Wyman. But I think it goes far back, and I'm like, are they using a de-aging thing here? So I'm really interested in the visuals of it because I think it was Dennis Quaid the whole time. It's the same. He's got this very specific way of producing the Reagan voice, and it always felt like him. So if it's not him, then it's somebody else doing Quaid's version of who's really good at sounding like Dennis Quaid as Ronald Reagan, which is very interesting. So I think that Quaid is actually playing him the whole time, which is kind of bonkers. But you know, de-aging technology these days. Um, Quaid's been around long enough that you can take footage of him from when he was younger. It's not that hard. I'm sure AI helps, but it just worked all the way up through. Talked a little about his work as with the Screen Actors Guild, his fight against communism. That's a huge thing here. His fight against communism, and a lot of like the core tenets. Of course, it doesn't address anything that people would love to address. It's not really a heavily. This film isn't really critical of Reagan. So for people in the LGBTQ community who would love to see, you know, the AIDS epidemic be a huge factor here, and Reagan's handling of that um, being put on display. And of course, it doesn't do that. This doesn't no. Uh, but I can think of so many other biopics that really have that kind of take soft approaches to their subject matters, and then later on we're like, but what about this? So this isn't the first one to do it, but it does kind of keep it from greatness because I think what I enjoyed about Reagan and why I didn't think it was a complete waste of time is the fact that it did admit that there were flaws. So it wasn't this thing that just painted him as being like Republican Jesus. Like um, just admitting that he was not an A-lister, for example, that he was struggling, and he has these conversations. He has one like with like Jack Warner, who's like, kid, you only got like a few years left in you. Like he's basically telling him, he's like, you're not, you and I both know you're not, you're not gonna last in this industry, like, and to have those sort of like frank conversations about it, because there's some people who talk about Ronald Reagan like they go back and watch his films like they do with Gary Cooper or somebody else from the same time period. It's like, no, he wasn't on that level. So, but I needed more of that. I just needed more of the ups and downs in this. Um, I get that, you get who you cast, I mean, that's that I would have cast this differently. And I would have cast it and kept Dennis Quaid. I mean, if Dennis Quaid had walked in the room and done this for his audition, I legitimately probably would have still cast him. I would have been like, yes, okay, Dennis, you can stay. But I don't think anybody else here. I mean, Russian John Voight is an odd choice, but he's a great actor. He actually pulls it off. I'm not going to say it's a bad choice. Um, he is actually a really good actor. So I know some people are like, well, his politics, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, he did fine. So, but along the way, we just have a lot of people who just can't. They're not giving Dennis what he needs, and the director doesn't really give Dennis what he needs, and the film doesn't really give Dennis what he needs, and the script doesn't really give Dennis what he needs. And at the end of the day, it just becomes kind of this like an unmemorable biopic. Not a bad one though. I think some people have torpedoed this because they're mad at it, and I'm not mad at this film at all. I liked the audio description. I do think the choice to have him play like generationally different versions of Reagan is hilarious because he plays Reagan all the way up through the time when he was like, I'm not going to use my opponent's age. I mean, like, but then also, I swear to God, he's on a college football team. So, I don't know. Dennis Quaid's range is just amazing. So, that's the takeaway. Is I guess the reason why I bothered to review Reagan is first it had audio description, and then why I'm bothering to talk to you about it now is I actually like Dennis Quaid. I didn't hate John Voight, but pretty much everybody else I would have recast here. I don't think it's a strong ensemble. The director is not terrible. It's not poorly directed. It's just not challengingly directed. There's nothing here that lifts it up to where it belongs. Lift this film up to where it belongs. Anyway, so and not every president has a biopic. And Reagan, he had two terms. He's sort of is fairly recent in memory, and I guess there's a reason to do one. He had some historical moments in there. I'm not going to take that away. The tear down this wall moment is absolutely, like that's going to go down in history, whether you like Reagan or not. It's a great fucking moment. The tearing down of the Berlin Wall. So, um, but yeah. Anyway, um, this will either be for you or it won't be. And for me, there isn't enough here for me to necessarily recommend it, but at the same time, if you're a really big Dennis Quaid fan, I think what he's doing here is interesting. That's the best compliment I can give this movie, is to keep leaning in on the Dennis Quaid thing. Um, I liked him in this, and the audio description is really well done. So, thank you for audio describing this. But for me, for Reagan, I'm just going to give it a C. I think it's I don't think it's bad. I've definitely seen worse movies this year. But it does feel like the cast was just like, they were more concerned about like who aligned with their views than they were finding the right people for these roles. Like, were these people really the best people you could have gotten for these roles? If you're really trying to make a true Reagan biopic, are these the best actors for these roles? And I don't know, but I did think Dennis Quaid did a good job. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys on the other side.